All right. The National Federation of Independent Business yesterday released a Washington specific version of they do this monthly, their small business economic trends report. What they released was a 6-month compilation of figures for Washington state. And they looked at a number of important categories where Washington is falling well below national trends for small business. One of them was, are you expecting the economy to improve? Another was, do you plan to increase employment for your business? And then finally, is now a good time for your business to expand? We did not score very well in any of those questioned categories. So, in an interview today that I had with Patrick Connor, state director here in Washington for the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, he said the results he hopes will be a wake up call for Olympia lawmakers whose policies NFIB blames for crushing Washington business.
Our state's average minimum wage is the highest in the country. So when you start with a base wage that is higher than most everyone else in the country, that puts you at a competitive disadvantage. Add on to it that we are an outlier when it comes to the benefits paid and the premiums or taxes collected from employers for things like unemployment insurance and workers' compensation. We're only one of 4 states, in fact, that has a state-run workers' compensation system, and it shows. Our state-run system spends $1.75 for every dollar that they bring in. They manage to balance the books by bringing down reserves and investment income, thankfully. But you can't sustain that, which is why we're seeing year-over-year increases of nearly 5% just in the workers' comp system. We've got an unemployment insurance system that has been retooled, and now we're being told that employers could expect as much as a $700 to $800 million hit over the next 2 to 3 years because they're changing the calculations on the premium base. Add to that, we've got a paid family medical leave program, which, while very popular, is terribly expensive. We are about to hit the cap on the premiums or the taxes that are assessed on employers and workers alike. We've just launched the Washington Cares program, another tax on workers, and soon we'll have the Washington Saves program, which, while well intended, will take more dollars, perhaps 5% on average, out of workers' paychecks to put it into a mandatory retirement savings account. So every time you turn around, the state is asking small employers to do more, to pay more, and it makes it difficult then for them to invest in their workers, to invest in their business, and to do a better job of being able to expand their operations and serve their customer base.
Now, among the NFIB findings here in Washington for, members basically saying, I can't expand, I can't add new employees, I might have to shut down my business. Labor costs dramatically worse here in Washington state than in the US overall, um, with more than twice as many of the respondents saying that this is their top problem. Apparently, the last time the NFIB took this survey of Washington small businesses, 9% said that those employee costs were their top concern. Now it's 19% saying that is their top concern. And the best single metric they say on the health overall of the small business environment is their optimism index. Um, it currently rates conditions in the US overall as decent, slightly above their historical average in, other reports in recent past. But here in Washington state, it was not so good. It's a flashing red light. And Connor told me that the cost of hiring is definitely keeping employees or keeping employers, I should say, from bringing on new employees. And they're hearing and seeing from their members how bad it really is. As he put it, I'll read this quote you shared with me. The millionaire's tax is just adding bitter frosting onto a terrible cake when it comes to our state's economy and job creation.
You can go to any downtown core in any city or town in the state, and you will find probably not just one, but several empty storefronts. That's not a coincidence. That's a result of the bad economic decision making coming out of Olympia on a regular basis. I mean, the fact that we had a millionaire's tax enacted this year on top of the state's largest $9.5 billion package of taxes just in 2025 is astounding. I mean, how you expect people to absorb $15 billion in new taxes over two legislative sessions to me just is nonsensical. Um, we will continue to see more and more vacant storefronts. You're going to see fewer small businesses because they are going to look elsewhere. And if the legislature doesn't dramatically change course, more and more your decisions for shopping, for entertainment opportunities, for dining, I mean, we're headed to the point to where every retailer is going to be a big box store, every restaurant is going to be a national chain because you've got to be big enough to absorb these costs where small businesses have a very difficult time competing. So I think you'll continue to see increases in the turnover of businesses. There may be a good number of new businesses created, but Washington has got a terrible record when it comes to maintaining those businesses. We have one of the nation's highest failure rate within 5 years. That situation is getting worse. It's not getting better. And bad decision making from Olympia, from the people who've been making these same decisions now for nearly a decade or longer when you talk about the governor's office, is driving our small business economy down the drain.
So, in the Small Business Economic Report for winter 2026, NFIB noted that Washington's unemployment rate is at 5.1%. That is well above the national average. In fact, ranks us 45th among all US states. So, not a glowing outlook. And again, NFIB is hoping that Washington policymakers, majority Democrats, will be paying attention and perhaps pivot, make some changes for the coming legislative session, and give them a break. Now, it has been a few weeks since the Washington State Democratic Party adopted their new party platform. It received a lot of attention, even on the national stage, because they want reparations for Black Washingtonians, and they adopted some pretty anti Semitic ideas, including um, a policy statement that basically says the rise in anti Semitism is the fault of Jewish people and of the state of Israel. It did not go over well, as you can imagine, with some Washington Democrats, especially members of the Jewish caucus, who felt blindsided by the platform. So this morning, I had a chance to interview Democratic Party chair for the state of Washington, Shasti Conrad, about their controversial platform. And we initially discussed the sort of anti Semitic platform ideals.
I certainly, never want to, or never want any members of our community to feel like anything that's in our platform is something that causes them harm or pain or anything like that. So certainly take the concern seriously. What I will say is that, issues related to to Gaza, to the Middle East and whatnot, still are very pertinent to our community. Democrats are still feeling quite passionate on, sort of multiple sides related to the issue. We did on our side everything that we could to, try to include our Jewish caucus members, to, include the perspectives of Jewish community members in making sure that we had a platform that, didn't harm them. There was some of this language did get through, but truly it was driven by our delegates. We had nearly 1,000 people from every part of the state that came together to write the platform, to discuss the platform, and then to pass it. And it passed basically unanimously. So I think what it says is that the target really was on Netanyahu's government, and that was the focus, not the Jewish community. That it was about what's happening, that's being driven by foreign government.
Now, Democratic State Senator Jesse Solomon, who co chairs the Jewish Legislative Caucus, not pleased, as you might imagine. And he told JNS News recently that the anti Israel language in the platform is not surprising. He says it's not an isolated incident. He, told JNS it is clear that unless one is willing to denounce all affinity for the Jewish state, we are not welcome in many progressive spaces. He said no other identity group is subjected, to something like that. So lots more to come on that, I'm sure. And I did reach out. I spoke briefly with Senator Solomon this morning and am anticipating some further quotes in my article that I'm putting up today on our Center Square Washington page. So I encourage you to check that out a little bit later today once I'm done with the article and it's published. Also, the other controversial party platform piece for Washington Democrats is a push for reparations. It includes the study and implementation of reparations, which is something already being funded by a 2025 $300,000 budget item, where the Department of Commerce hired a contractor to study how that would really work. I mean, are we talking about direct cash payments to Black individuals? How Black do you have to be, right? Somebody who's only half Black or quarter Black. Would they still qualify for potential reparations? Or would this simply be an expansion of race-based programs that we already have here in Washington state, like the Covenant Home Ownership Program? So again, here is Washington Democratic Party Chair Shasti Conrad.
We're proud that it appears to be that we're the first state in the country to take up making sure that reparations was a part of our platform. It was very much driven by our Black caucus and members of the diversity Democrats for Diversity and Inclusion group, and Jesse Weinberry and whatnot, like a lot of our activists who really fought to make sure that this was recognized in our platform. And so, I feel like all credit goes to them. And again, passed unanimously, no issues at all from our delegates, because I think that folks recognize that, justice, needs to be served, and we need to address the long-term effects of slavery in this country, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to uplift, the descendants of the African American community here, not just in Washington state, but in the entire country.
And probably no surprise that Washington's Republican Party Chairman Jim Walsh has some sharp words of criticism for the party platform that Democrats have adopted. He calls it radically progressive. So here is Representative Jim Walsh of Aberdeen reacting to the direction of Washington state's Democrats.
The Washington Democrats are in desperate trouble. They've been hijacked by radical, irrational leftists. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They're communists, they're collectivists, and they're pushing a Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, Saul Alinsky agenda. They use words like reparations. They don't even know what that means. And it's one of the ironies that they demand reparations to people, but at the same time, they want to open the borders to open immigration. It is inherently and internally inconsistent. And there were sections of the platform that are blatantly anti-Semitic, blaming Israel for the violence in the Middle East, saying they brought it on themselves, that they were attacked by terrorists. It's crazy stuff, and it's a testament to how that party has been commandeered by the communists.
So again, I encourage you to check out the Center Square Washington for an article with a lot further deeper dive into this important issue, something that we're going to continue to talk about. And again, I hope to have those further comments from Senator Solomon. His perspective and co-chairing the Jewish caucus for the Democrats is a voice that is important to elevate in this conversation. All right, now a Seattle housing proposal that would have given developers an 80% break on mandatory housing affordability fees, MHA fees, appears to be dead. The Housing Development Consortium informed the mayor's office that some of their members felt that they didn't have enough of a say in how all this went down. So they put the brakes on. And when they went to the mayor's office and said, we're not on board with this now, the mayor's office said, okay, I guess we're backing out of this deal. Now, this comes at a time when, of course, Seattle has a crisis in housing, not just, single family homes, but rental housing, affordable housing, higher income units. They haven't been building much at all over the last couple of years for a variety of reasons, but it's reached a real crisis point at this juncture. So this again has all been about the suspension of these MHA fees, or the 80% suspension, has been about speeding up the pipeline for construction. Now, developers building in mandatory housing affordability, what this required them to do, and I'm going to read from this so I don't get this wrong, but they either had the option of making an in lieu financial contribution to the city's Seattle Office of Housing Trust Fund, which currently has hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in that fund, we should note. And that's to support nonprofit affordable housing construction. Or in lieu of making that financial contribution, the developer has to agree then to say, okay, well then I don't want to pay that fee, but I will insure a certain percentage of the new units in this high rise or whatever I'm building will be for low income tenants. So it has to be one or the other. But that has been a real, driver as to why there hasn't been a lot of private construction in the city of Seattle. And so they have had this proposal to kind of give these developers a break. So things were progressing along, thousands of new units in the pipeline, and all of a sudden the brakes are on. So I want to share part of my interview that I did on Wednesday evening with Natalie Quick. She's co-founder of the Seattle Housing Roundtable, and they're pretty upset about this about face because they've been working with the Housing Development Consortium and also with the mayor's office on this for quite some time, and felt that everything was progressing, give and take. And she knows that the need for housing in the city of Seattle is absolutely critical.
New permit applications, according to city data, have dropped 88% from that 2020 peak housing production. We actually just got the Q2 2026 numbers from the city, and now it's 94%. So new housing applications are down 94% right now for multifamily housing in Seattle. On the flip side of that, year over year completions dropped almost 35%. So alarm bells are going off for us, right? That we're not getting new production and new completions are finishing. And so supply and demand tells us we are running out of new supply coming to market. And for renters, that is not a good equation, right? That only leads to increased rent. And so as supporters of housing, we are trying desperately to say to the city, you have a really quick moment in time here to act and do something on a temporary basis that is laser focused on two things. It is laser focused on freeing up thousands of units right now that are stuck in permitting and cannot get their construction loan. If we can't solve for that, those units are going to die. Those projects go away.
Now, we did reach out to the office of Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson 2 days in a row, receiving no response at all as to what really happened here. Why are the brakes suddenly on? Is this potentially that, folks in affordable housing, government funded project people don't want the private sector developers getting any piece of the pie? Again, the office did not respond. But during a Tuesday, that Housing Development Consortium meeting, which I took part in that for about the first hour that it was going on, there was a spokesperson from the mayor's office. Her name is Nicole Ballesteros-Soper. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, but she said this, and we'll put up the graphic as to what she said in that meeting. She said, from the mayor's perspective, she, meaning Mayor Wilson, is very concerned about making sure we're meeting housing production that our region and that our city needs. There were important communities that felt behind felt left behind by this policy and that felt like they were being represented in what this policy contained. They felt like it could potentially harm their neighborhoods or communities. And so, again, maybe that's why the mayor has put the brakes on this. Now, Natalie Quick told me at this point, things don't look very promising, but they don't want to give up for good. They're still trying to negotiate with the mayor's office and potentially resurrect this program.
You know, the optimistic side of me says, where there's a will, there's a way, and we'll see what we can make happen. I do know what makes me feel hopeful is that the data is on our side. Like the story of where housing production is in Seattle right now is in a free fall. And it's not going to get better without something monumental like this in a temporary way to get things moving. But this is a very short window. This isn't a let's stakeholder this for 3 months and see how we feel. Our push to the mayor and HDC, which we had agreed on before, and the council was we were going to try to move this forward before budget started in the fall. And so moving this into 2027, deals are going to die. So it is definitely a, meet the moment. And I'm hopeful that something can come together, but we shall see.
So the Pasco City Council is pushing back against Washington's new income tax. They adopted a resolution on Monday opposing state and local personal income taxes. And one of the council members said he wants to go even further by creating a procedural hurdle before any future local income tax could be considered. My colleague Tim Clauser has put up an article about this today on our Center Square Washington page. I encourage you to check that out. But here is part of what they discussed at Monday's Pasco City Council meeting.
We've seen the state of Washington take a kind of left turn in regards to income tax policy, from the capital gains tax to the millionaire's tax. Some of these things are being, they're being, I guess, stayed in the courts. But I think my position on this, the reason why I brought it up, is I think we should have the ability for the people to have a say. And so by putting in an ordinance, it provides that legal hurdle, procedural hurdle, and it allows the council to discuss along with the community if the city actually wants to do that. I totally understand some of the legal arguments in the presentation or in the staff report talked about, the state law supersedes local law, but at the same time, I think we should be able to speak for ourselves and have our own policy. And so, to me, I just believe it's a safeguard for the community. The benefits of not having a income tax speak for itself. I don't need to speak to that. And I know there's a lot of individuals in our city who would be in favor of that. And so, I would be in favor of this resolution tonight, and also bringing back that ordinance.
And of course, the latest on the fight over the income tax here in the state of Washington has us waiting to find out if the Secretary of State is, in fact, going to certify the initiative that hopes to repeal the income tax. Those signature petitions were turned in last Thursday to the office of Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. And I was told as of Tuesday that they expected to take a total of 2 to 3 weeks from the time of turn in before they would have those certified. Now, with more than 500,000 signatures turned in, and they only needed 309,000 valid voter signatures, it is highly likely, anticipated, of course, that will in fact be qualified for the November ballot. But keep in mind, that's just the beginning of the big fight. Between now and November, we have 3 progressive leaning unions that have pledged about $3 million already for the fight. This comes from the Washington Education Association, that is the state teachers union, the Washington Federation of State Employees, WFSE, and also Service Employees International Union. They have chipped in about $1 million each for the fight to convince people that Washington's new income tax is a good idea. It'll be, again, ultimately up to voters come November, assuming that initiative qualifies for the ballot.